Fun this morning, right? We're going to be in Proverbs 14, verse 23. And I didn't make this sermon, I made it before the pipes busted, so I don't know, it might be my fault. But Proverbs 14:23, it says, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads to poverty. I'm just going to give you a little background on kind of where I grew up. This word hard work, or these two words hard work, were kind of what we did. I had my grandma on my dad's side had a farm. So she had cows and pigs and chickens and these annoying things called guineas. And my great-grandfather on my mom's side, he was a farmer also, but he grew vegetables and berries and things of that nature. So I spent a lot of my summers, winters, all seasons, either in a barn cleaning chicken pens, messing with hogs, cows, that nature. Or if I went to my other grandma's, I got the privilege of laying on the ground picking strawberries or raspberries or any other vegetable or anything he might decide to grow that year. And I also didn't even get a break at home because I didn't have a dad that was in the sports. He wasn't really into much of anything but work. He liked to work, and the Lord blessed me with not liking work. So me and him always was like, why don't you just chill and we go to a baseball game and or anything at this point. I was willing to be into anything but the work. And he told me, he's like, that's how I relax. I'm like, how do you relax? Is it because I'm doing the work and you're watching and that's how you relax or what? But he loved it. And like I said, I never did. I never cared much for the animals and the farms and the, getting up early on my summers and doing the strawberries and raspberries and stuff like that. And, then just to tell you how bad my dad was, people wouldn't stay the night at my house. Because if you stayed the night at my house and you happened to be the unlucky person that was there on a Saturday morning, he would come in and he would count, I have 3 or 4 people that can help me today. So nobody would stay, they'd fall for it once. And after working with him all day, they would, why don't you come to my house? So I spent the night at a lot of other people's houses because, like I said, this is how my dad, he said, relaxed. Was, he'd get out and work. And it wasn't just like, it wasn't small work either. Like, he'd like to build barns and dig ditches and things of that nature. But, so I was always taught that, my dad always taught me, if you want to have things, you have to work. He always was good at that. Both my parents were, they instilled that in me from an early age that, if you wanted to have things, you had to work for it. I remember my dad working, third shift, first shift, second shift, sometimes just all the way through. I remember one time I didn't see him for like a day or two, and he was just at work. He stayed at work and just worked and worked and worked and just came home and just crashed out. So this was instilled in me, if you want things, it's going to require you to put in a little effort, put in a little work. Right, just like we did this morning, right? Everybody came here and we all put in work. Everybody came together and put in some work to get all this stuff cleaned up. So, and I got to thinking about it, and it's true in anything you want in life. I've been told if you want to get in shape, just like I said, I've been told if you want to get in shape, you can't talk yourself into it, right? We can't sit here and talk and be like, I'm going to lift weights, I'm going to lift weights. And next thing you know, maybe my shirt's a little tighter. It doesn't work that way, right? If you want to get in shape, you have to go to a gym. Yeah, my shirt's getting tighter in a different spot. But you have to go to a gym, or you have to do something, right? You have to get on a treadmill, you have to do something. It requires some form of work. You have to sweat a little bit. It's the same thing with our mind. If you challenge yourself mentally, your brain grows stronger. But poor me, I learned a lot of these lessons the hard way, and I'm still learning some of them the hard way. Even though my parents, instilled this in me and they set that example, I didn't follow it right off the bat. I wasn't always a hard worker, and I did the minimum I could to get by. And this was in everything I did. Me and my dad, when he would work, sometimes I would try to trick him into thinking like he was making me wheelbarrow dirt from one spot to another. We were putting a floor into a barn with this limestone and stuff, and I was having to dig and pick in it and carry the wheelbarrow, and I'm like, man, I do not want to do this. So I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll make him mad. Because one thing about my dad is he had a little bit of a temper. And so I went, sat in the wheelbarrow, acted like I was asleep. So he came by and saw me and he just started yelling at me. Well, if you're just going to sleep, go in your room and sleep. I'll take care of this. Gotcha. So I would try to do the minimum I could. And this was in school too. I tried to just get by on, the bare minimum. If I didn't have to do it, I didn't do it. Even sometimes if I was supposed to do it and it would affect my grade from getting a D or an F, I still didn't do it. But I tried to just barely get by. And it worked. Like I said, I could make my dad mad a few times. He'd yell at me and, kick me off the job. Or I graduated school, big old South Central graduate. I think I had all D's. And I may have had a C or something one time. But I, just barely got by. And the problem with that was I took that into the next step. Yeah, my next step, when I got a job. And I decided right off the bat, I was going to move out. I was going to make my own money, and it was going to be different because I'm getting paid, right? I'm getting paid. I'm on my own. I've got this freedom. I don't have to listen to my parents. I don't have to get up Saturday mornings and help my dad. I can just ignore the phone call now. So I remember getting one of my first jobs, and like I said, I was in the rail industry, and that's where my dad worked. It was kind of a family thing. My uncle worked there. My dad worked there. I had a cousin that worked there. JJ worked there. And Justin worked there at one point too. So a lot of people I've met had worked there and stuff. So when I started, I was going through my stuff, and it's a pretty laborious job. We have to wear coveralls all year round, and we torch and we weld, and we're doing a lot of laborious work, and I wasn't a fan of it. So I found out that there was this cool thing that this company did where they would give you these points. You could call in, right? And you could call in and you could take these points, and as long as you didn't take too many, you were good, But just like everything else in my life, I took one too many a few times. Got called in the office. But here's where I remember when I said I always did the minimum and expected that you should reward me for that. If I got up and showed up to work, you should be thankful. If I showed up to school, you should be thankful. Give me a C or a B or maybe even an A. Maybe because I stayed awake. But it came time for our yearly evaluations, and I was sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I wonder how big of a raise I'm going to get. How much money is this guy going to throw at me? And he threw little to none my way. So probably a normal person that maybe had a little more common sense would understand. Not me. So I got mad. was like, what is this race? Like, this isn't right, you know. I got so upset with him. It was just, me and him started yelling at each other. And finally he was like, you don't ever show up. And when you are here, you don't do much work. Oh, touche. I didn't know, that's so, and it's funny now, but back then I was a little, probably that dense where I was like I said, I expected that I'd walk in there and he should be like, how much you want, and just throw money on the desk for me. But that's not what happened. That's what he said straight to my face. He was like, well, you don't show up. You're not trustworthy. I can't depend on you to come in every day. And I'm ashamed to say that, my walk with God was the same way. I wanted to do the bare minimum and expected God to just give me this grand, struggle-free life. Like I shouldn't have to have any problems. I went to church, this month. I showed up a couple times this month. I maybe even tithed just a little bit. I've done a few things, Lord, so therefore I don't want any problems. The funny thing is, it doesn't work that way, right? Just like my boss, he was like, well, you don't show up, I can't trust you. You're not trustworthy. And the thing about God is, like I said, it's been a long learning process for me, but God calls us to do difficult things that require this thing called work, and dare I say hard work sometimes. Like sometimes you come to church and there's a flood. Sometimes there's hard things that need to be done. So the Bible is full of people like this. So I don't know where I got my theology from early on, because like I said, my father didn't raise me that way. My mother didn't raise me that way. And, my great-grandfather, my grandma, all of them were super hard workers. They were tough people. So, I don't know where I got my theology from, and I just expected all this stuff. But if we go to Genesis 12, verse 1, it says, the Lord said to Abram, Go from your country, your people and your father's household, to the land I will show you. Now, what's funny about this story is, this may not seem like a difficult thing. Like, sometimes God calls us to go somewhere else. God calls us maybe to preach somewhere else or maybe move to a different state and stuff. But he didn't tell Abram, soon to be Abraham, he didn't tell him where he was going. To me, that's difficult. I don't know if I could do that now. If God was like, take your family and just start driving, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Don't worry about your mom, don't worry about your dad, family, just go. When you pull out the driveway, I'll start giving you directions, and where we wind up is where we wind up. That's a difficult thing. Then we in Genesis 6, verse 14, it says, so make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. Now here we have Noah. Noah, a little bit better of a guy than me. He's a whole lot better than me, because just to reference Genesis 6:8, it says he was a righteous man. So we know the story of Noah. It's pretty basic that the world was corrupt. God was done with it, and he's gonna send a flood. But he had this one guy and his family that were righteous and were good. But did you notice something else in this story? He didn't give God a boat, or Noah a boat. That would have been nice, right? But like, I'm going to send this flood, but first you got to do a little work. Abram, I'm going to show you this place that's going to be yours, and your descendants are going to be, as many as the stars. But first you have to do something a little difficult. You have to leave your family. And how easy would it have been for God just to give him a boat? And I think about this sometimes, that Noah labored and toiled for years upon years upon years upon years building this boat. And I expect to have a struggle-free life because I showed up. I sat in a chair this Sunday. So like I said, God might not be calling us to pick up and drive someplace. Maybe he's not. Maybe. I don't know. And maybe he's not telling us to make an ark. But God still requires us to do some difficult things. So I kind of made a little selfish list here because this is some stuff that I have struggled with or continue to struggle with. And the first one is love your enemies. Now that doesn't make any sense at all to me. They're your enemies. Why would you love them? Right, Matthew 5, 43 and 40, verses 43 and 44, it says, You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I can get down with that. That part of it, that sounds right. We want to love our neighbor, maybe the person, we can go borrow a cup of sugar from, that might help us mow our grass, or we can love them. But somebody that just causes you difficulty for no reason, or just wants to harm you, we can hate that person, right? But he says, I tell you, which is Jesus, just so if we're unclear, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So if it's not bad enough, I got to love my enemies, I got to pray for the people that persecute me. I don't even like praying for people if they give me a dirty look. I mean, being honest, I don't. Like, if you're going to give me a hard way to go, I'm thinking like, God, can you not take care of this guy? Like, he says, no, you got to love him, pray for him. Like, really? Like, that's why I say at work when things go wrong, I'm like, oh, really? Really? I'm sure a lot of people said that this morning when they walked in the doors. Really? But that's what he says. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. The next one is turn the other cheek. In Matthew 5, verse 38, it says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So this doesn't make sense to me either. Why would you let somebody slap you twice? It's something I've always told my boys. And I'm sure I would consider every good father, right? Probably said the same thing at one point to their kids. Like, look, I don't want you starting fights. So I tell my kids, like, we're not going to be bullies. We're not going to make fun of people. We're going to respect people. We're going to do the best we can to respect people. But if somebody's got you back down in a corner, man, you better tear them up. But that's not what Jesus says. He says, turn the other cheek also. Could I be wrong? In this, like I said, I'm sure my dad told it to me, those exact things. I don't want you starting fights, but if somebody comes at you, you better defend yourself. We'll get to that in a minute. The last one is forgiving. Now, we talked about this a little bit in our men's group Saturday. Was it last Saturday, right? Last Saturday? One of those Saturdays in January. Forgiving. And Ephesians 4, verses 31 and 32 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. And that's a tough one. That one might be the toughest of all for me in times. Is that, I was writing this down. I like to write my verses out, so I have them right here with my notes, and it helps me kind of memorize them a little bit. And I remember writing this one, and I was like, bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander. And I'm like, and what else? Like, but it says, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. Now, I was not raised this way. We were not raised on our farm as, just to give you a little more background, my dad's number 11 out of 12 kids. And they all had a bunch of kids too, so I had a lot of cousins. And like I said, since my dad was number 11, by the time I came around, I got beat up a lot. You know, I didn't fare any better when I met Coy either, because you know, something about I'm hanging out with the youngest. That's the problem, right? I need to hang out with the older. My dad was one of the youngest, so by the time I come along, all my cousins were way older and bigger than me, and stuff like that. But we were taught that, you know, if somebody harms you or one of your cousins, you got to take care of that. You got to do that. I was taught that if somebody gets you, you got to get them. You know, it's like I said, it's okay to love the people that help you. You know, this was really big on my dad's side of the family. If you came to the farm and you helped us out, you would be our friend forever. It didn't matter what you did after that. You could be the worst person in the world, but if you did something nice for my grandma or one of my uncles or aunts or cousins or something and helped them out of a tough spot, it's a good person. You know, we like those people. And I was taught, you know, we don't forgive. We don't forgive, we don't forget. So you may have gotten me today, but I'll remember. That's what my dad used to tell me. Whenever I would mess with him a little bit, and we'd wrestle around a little bit, and I'd maybe get a little better of him, and I'd run off, because I knew. He goes, that's all right, you'll forget. And I always did. He's like, you'll forget, you'll be back. And, but this was the way I was kind of raised, was like, you know, we watched out for each other. You know, we didn't forgive, we didn't forget. We made sure we were the first to, you know, maybe throw the punch, you know, if we needed to. You know, you just weren't, I wasn't raised for that. It was like an eye for eye mentality. And I learned this lesson the hard way too, because I was in 3rd grade, and, you know, like I said, I've been preached this since I was old enough to understand. If somebody's messing with one of your cousins, you got to do something about it. So I had a cousin that was in like 6th, 7th grade, and I looked up to him. He's my favorite of all the cousins. You know, he was one of the ones that was always nice to me. You know, he didn't beat me up too much. And if he did, he didn't, you know, it was maybe just a little bit. But I liked him. You know, we got along real well. And like I said, so much that they would let me sit, like, you know, back in, I don't know if it's still like this on school buses now, but whenever I went to school, you had certain places you had to sit. If they weren't assigned seats, it's just where you were supposed to sit. So the big high schoolers got to sit in the back, then your middle schoolers, then your upper grade school kids, and the little kids had to sit in the front. So like I said, I'm in 3rd grade, and they're 7th, 8th grade, and they let me sit back there with them. So I've already got this puffed up, you know, I can sit wherever I want. Because my cousin's back here, you know, my older cousins are all back here. I can do whatever I want. And I remember my cousin one time saying, man, that guy right there. He pointed to this guy. He said, somebody needs to take care of him. Somebody needs to do something about him. He did something, I don't remember what it was. He did something to my cousin. Did something to him and said, man, somebody's got to get him. So, like I said, this is what I've been preached. This is my moment. Like I said, 3rd grade, run straight back to the seat, to this, like I said, 7th, 8th grader, and straight just punch him in the nose. Right? So what nobody else told was, what they failed to mention was, when you punch somebody and they don't react, you should probably keep punching or run away. So I went back there, threw a punch, and he just kind of looked up at me, because I'm a little kid. He looked at me, and I'm like, yeah. And he beat me up and beat me up. He beat my head against the bus window. I remember I had to sit next to him the whole ride home because I was just like, I can't move. Not one person came to help me. The cousin I liked, the cousin I adored, left me hanging, right? So, like I said, that's just kind of how I was, how I was raised. Quite opposite of this: love your enemies, turn your other cheek, or just forgiving. Those three things there require so much effort. So much effort, especially, like I said, especially on my part. Since I got to preach, I got to pick the ones that, there's other things that, many other things that God requires us to do that, require some hard work and are difficult. But these are the ones for me that I think I struggle with the most. So these require effort on my part, and if I don't put in the work, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I can fall back into that old mentality. If I don't put the things God says into practice, that old me can rise up pretty quick. You can ask my kids. They see it probably more than anybody now when they get out of line and stuff. And if I don't check myself, that old me can come back real quick. And but the good news is, unlike my work situation back then, where I had to start showing up to work, I had to start doing my job, and stuff like that. With the spiritual things here, these love your enemies and turn the other cheek and forgiveness, I have God. That's the good news with this. Because if I don't have God and I don't practice the things God says, that's when it all goes wrong for me. I don't know if you guys are any different, but for me, that's what happens. If I don't stay in spiritual shape, if I don't challenge myself, that old me can just kind of come back up. In 1 Corinthians 3, chapter 7, it says, "So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow." I feel like this verse, it was actually our verse of the day yesterday for our men's group. And I didn't have any intention of putting this verse in here. I had a different verse for this. I was like, that makes more sense to me. That, God will do, if we're willing to do the work, if we're willing to plant, to water, to do the things, God will make it grow. God is right there with us to use our efforts for His kingdom. But once again, I'm going to say it again, we need to be willing to put in the work and allow God to use us. Now, I preach this a lot too. How do we do that? I can't just tell somebody, well, if you want to lose weight, go to the gym. What do I know about it, right? I haven't studied up on that part of my life, but it says we need to be willing to put in the work to allow God to use us by staying prayed up, studied up, are the first two things. And like I said, I preach that quite a bit, but the reason I preach it quite a bit is because it's what changed my life around. It's where that 180 happened for me. With Pastor Coy saying kind of the same thing. I would go to Pastor Coy just like I did my boss. I didn't do any work. Where's my raise? So, kind of going to Coy, it'd be like, man, I'm so mad at God. I'm struggling all the time. Watching other people, be successful, and then I'm struggling. Things are falling apart for me. Things are just in the toilet for me. Why? And Coy has this real cool way. We've been friends for since I was in ninth grade. And so we've got this, I call it a special connection of he can say things to me that maybe he wouldn't say to you guys, or maybe, we kind of have that accountability toward each other. And I remember just saying that, and I remember hearing him just, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing on your part? What do you mean, what am I doing on my part? I showed up to church twice. Two times out of 4, that's not bad, right? What are you doing? Do you have a daily devotion? Are you praying? Are you staying studied and up? Are you in the Word every day? What are you doing? And it made me so mad. I think I just wanted to be mad at that point. But, I've heard Coy say this, not just to me, but to other people too, where, what's your prayer life look like? I think that's Coy's superpower, is staying calm and making just an obvious statement that'll change your life. He used to do it when we worked at the cable company. We used to deal with these customers that weren't so happy about us being in their yard. And Coy was a supervisor, and I was one of the crew members that was on the underground crew. So we dug holes in people's yards. People loved it. They would come out and just be happy, and they would invite us back, into their yard. But they would get so mad. And I remember just being so mad about, like, why are you bothering me? I'm in easement. I'm doing my job. Leave me alone. And they would just yell. And Coy just would come out, and next thing you know, they would be, okay. Like, what did you do? But this is kind of one of the important things he's done for me in my life through our friendship, through all these years, was just kind of maybe stating an obvious thing. One of my favorite quotes Coy ever said to me was, we were working job. It was a horrible job. I was mad. And that's kind of the theme of our friendship, if you haven't got that yet, is I get mad, I yell, Coy says something clever. But I got so mad about this job, and we had these little Nextel walkie-talkie things. So hit him up. Yeah, what's up? Man, this job's horrible. It is horrible. We're not going to make any money on it. It's hard. The ground's hard. The job's hard. Nothing's going our way. He goes, works hard. That's it. Works hard. So and the guy next to me goes, he just say works hard? He did. And even funnier thing about Coy is we got back to the shop, and I was like, works hard? He goes, what are you talking about? It's like, you told me when I was yelling at you about the job being tough, you said works hard. Did I? And anybody that knows Coy can relate to that. But this is difficult things, to stay prayed up, studied up. It's hard. Work is hard. Also, stuff we have to do is we have to be willing to step out of comfort zones. And once again, this is a tough one for me. A tough one. One of the biggest fears I have, are you ready, is public speaking. I despise it. I get so nervous. I always think I'm going to say something stupid. I don't walk too far on stage, so I'm afraid I'm going to fall off and embarrass myself. I'm afraid just anything that could happen. And I remember we were at a church in Elizabeth one time, and this pastor came up to me, and he said, man, I feel like you really got a gift for preaching and teaching. No, you got the wrong guy. That's Coy. Coy's always been a talker. That was always Coy's thing. Like, no, you got the wrong guy. And I didn't do anything to make him think that. Like, I didn't step out of any comfort zones when I was going to youth group at our little church. Like I said back at the beginning, bare minimum. Might show up, draw on my paper a little bit, doodle. cause some trouble, and leave. That was kind of my thing. So God called me into the preaching and teaching thing. It's not where I wanted to be. It's not. If I had my choice, I'd rather be back there. I'm comfortable back there. But work's hard, right? Work is hard. The last thing is you got to be consistent. You got to be consistent. This is something else that it took me way too long to grasp. You got to be consistent. I can't go to the gym tomorrow and then not go to the gym for 3 months and expect to be strong or to lose weight or whatever I wanted. I can't go to work and work Monday and not show up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday and expect to get a full paycheck. I can't expect to do one thing for God and then expect Him to just move mountains for me. You have to be consistent. And I'm really kissing up to Coy this week, I guess, but Coy's really showed this with the Psalms 365:1. I know he came up here and said, he's a little nervous, and we talked about it, and he's like, man, I'm a little nervous. This is a big undertaking, but it's so cool to see how consistent he is with it. We get those videos. He's so faithful in doing that. And this is what we have to do. We have to be prayed up, studied up, willing to step out of comfort zones, and be consistent. This is where we're able to do those hard tasks. Where we're able to, once again, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, forgive. This is where that starts. And like I said, this is in my life. Like I said, I didn't want to be up here. I definitely didn't want to do a lot of this stuff. I was so comfortable just being that guy that could show up, maybe help out somewhere, as long as it wasn't, up here preaching. I didn't even mind being back there because, I could kind of be back there and out of the eyesight of most people. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. I wanted to sit back there in the chairs back there, or like I said, the sound booth. I'll do that. But that's not what God called me to do. I could see God saying, well, callings and are hard. I don't call you to do the comfortable things. But why not, Lord? Why not? Why can't we just have the struggle-free life? Right? Why not? I heard a quote one time that stuck with me. It says, a good sailor was never made by calm seas. And that stuck with me. You don't become good at sailing a boat or anything by just always being in calm water. And our walk is like that too. You don't become a better Christian. You don't become closer to God by just having it easy all the time. Because what would happen, for me anyway, like I said, I speak for me. Because what would happen is if I really got that struggle-free life and God was like, look, here's that white picket fence, everything's perfect, I'd forget about God. Truth, just, speaking truth. I'd forget. I'd take it for granted. Maybe I wouldn't be happy with that. Who knows? But the best way I've found to get closer to God is stay prayed up, studied up, step out of comfort zones, and be consistent. If you do those things, you could have success just at your job. You could have success anywhere. Really, if you just stay consistent. You're willing to step out and do things that maybe you're not so comfortable with. Maybe God's been calling you to do something difficult. I don't know. Maybe He's been saying, hey, I've called you for this. Maybe He said, hey, it's time to step out. Or maybe He's saying, hey, what's your prayer life like? You in the Word? Are you consistent? Are we doing this? Are we doing these things every day? I don't know. Like I said, I try to stay out of people's business, but I know for me that this is where the turning point has happened. When I first came back here, I didn't want to come back here. And I've told this testimony a few times to people, but like we left, and it was because I was mad. It's because I was angry and yelled at Coy. And Coy's kind of like, yeah, okay, do what you got to do. I was so mad at this church because things weren't going my way. Now, did you hear that? Things weren't going my way. And I just said, see you later. I'm taking me, my family, we're going to go to a different church. It'll be better there. I don't need to do this stuff. I don't need to stay prayed up. I don't need to study. I don't need to step out of any comfort zones. And I sure don't need to be consistent. And I found myself, this is how I know I would forget, because it didn't take too many Sundays of going to a church here, going to a church here. That old me jumped right into the driver's seat. And next thing you know, wasn't going. Or we're going on a Saturday night here and there, just trying to go to these big churches where you could really hide. You could sit way up in the stadium. I could sleep. I could do whatever I wanted. And thank God, one of my things that God's done consistently in my testimony is He's been consistent with putting people in my life that He knew I needed. He knew I was going to need a Coy when I was in high school. He knew I was going to need Coy and Brandy when I got out of high school. He knew I was going to need Jacqueline. And at this moment, when I was done with church and was really, really starting to play with the idea of maybe it's all fake. People make mistakes, right? Maybe these guys got it wrong that wrote the Bible. And I was going down that path. And then God put 3 boys in my life that He knew I needed at that time. God was real consistent the whole way through, whether I saw it or not. He was real consistent. And they were like, we want to go back to Emmaus. Why do you want to go back to Emmaus? It was horrible there. Well, we want to go back. And we've told this story before. I blamed Isaiah because Maddox is like, well, Isaiah's there. My friends are there. Maddox refused to do anything that, like, go to any kind of children's thing or teenage thing at these other churches. So I'm like, fine, we'll go back to Emmaus. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not happy about it. Even Jacqueline was like, we should probably go back. All right, but this is going to be on you guys. Jacqueline, Maddox, Noah, Nathan. This is all on you. I think Nathan was even a little, but it's going to be your fault when things go sideways, because they will go sideways, because that's what I thought. That's what I knew was going to happen. That we were going to go back and it was just going to be horrible. But like I said, God's consistently pushed and put people and done the work, done the hard work for a poor, pitiful, guy like me that sometimes doesn't always get it. That sometimes, is maybe the last to get it, or, is just struggles sometimes, with irrational anger and things of that nature. And we came back, and I tried to pull that card a bunch of times. Something will go wrong. I told you, ride home. Told you guys. Told you. Should have just stayed home and got donuts. Told you. But then a funny thing happened. Coy started talking about, how's your devotional life? Are you staying prayed up? Are you in the Word? I'm thinking, no, I'm not. So I got to the point where I was like, if I'm going to call myself a Christian, if I'm going to call myself a believer, then I need to be all in. If this is really real, which, spoiler alert, it is. If this is really the case, then I need to be doing these things, right? I need to be doing these things. You know, like I said, I'm ashamed that it took me this long. But once again, it was just something Coy was saying. I don't even think he was talking to me. He was just talking to the congregation or talking to somebody else, and I overheard it. And it was like, oh, okay. So I decided right then and there I was going to do whatever I could to just help out wherever I could. You know, and then COVID hit. So I was like, I'll do the videos. And then the sound. Then I was like, well, maybe I'll serve communion. And Coy kind of laid back and kind of let me just get my feet wet. And I'd preached here before, previous to that. When Grant and Coy was the associate pastor, they would let me preach on every fifth Sunday. And I thought that was gone. You know, I was like, I kind of burnt that bridge, you know, with the see you later. And once again, Coy's like, you ever thought about maybe getting back in the preaching? I was like, man, I don't know, dude. I was kind of a punk the way I left here and stuff. And, you know, I don't know if I could. You know, I don't know if I could start over there. And he's like, well, who's asking you to start over? This, once again, so I'm not asking you to start over. He's like, just pick up where you left off. He's like, you don't drive halfway to your destination, stop, and then decide, I didn't want to go there, but then decide you do. Do you go back to your house and then start again? Like, well, no, I'll start driving from where I left off. And he's like, well. He's like, well, I'm thinking about doing this thing anyway with some guys, you know, pastors in training thing. He's like, you know, that's Coy. You know, think about it, pray about it. And I think, like I said, I thank God that he done all these things for me. You know, that he was able to be consistent in my life. You know, just like he is in all our lives. If we look back, you'll see the consistency of God in our lives. The people he put in there. You know, multiple people. I mean, there's people I didn't even mention that he put in my life that got me to where I was going, to where I'm at now. So, like I said, this is how we're able to do these tasks. Stay prayed up, studied up, step out of comfort zones, and be consistent. Like I said, I'm going to preach that a lot just because it's changed me. And it's helped me overcome my speaking fear. You know, it's helped me be a little more consistent. You know, the beautiful thing is, it's helped me when I have those moments. Whenever those old Jeremys come back, instead of getting angry and getting mad and, you know, blaming everybody else, I look at me and then I just say, hey, it doesn't matter. I'm going to stay prayed up, studied up, and consistent, no matter what happens. You know, it's not the end of the world. This is small compared to what some people have to deal with. And just keep moving. I follow a lot of people on, a lot of these guys on Instagram, and that's one of the consistent things they say. You know, just keep moving. Don't stop. That's consistency. Keep moving. You may be in that rut. You may be in that struggle. Like I said, God may be tugging on you to do something that's a little difficult. It's okay. Keep moving. Matthew 9:37 says, then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. That's kind of a sad verse. It's kind of a sad verse, but the workers are few. So as the praise team comes up, let me challenge you or encourage you to be the few. You know, there's people out there like me that just are struggling to get it. There's people out there just like me that just need that one person in their life. What if you're that person? What if that's you? What if Coy, Jacqueline, my kids, my mom and dad, all these people that God so consistently set up in my life said, he'll be all right. Because where God was consistent, there was people that stepped out of their comfort zones. I wasn't always the easiest person to approach. You never knew what was going to set me off. And me and Coy were like that, where it was like, he didn't know if I'd get mad and maybe leave the church and never come back. But man, he stayed consistent in my life and stepped out of a lot of probably his comfort zones to help me out. Jacqueline, same thing. I talk about that all the time too, where I told Jacqueline one time, I was like, I don't know why you never just didn't leave me. Like, man, I was hard to get along with. Like I said, just all this irrational anger and just all this nonsense. Why didn't you leave me? And once again, there's something else that stuck with me and it'll never leave me. She said, I seen the person you could have been at that moment. Coy's seen the person that could be. God sees the person that I can be. And he sees it in you guys too. I'm not special. I think we've covered that pretty well. I'm not special. I'm nobody. Just like in this Corinthians, I'm watering the plants and we're planting and watering. It's only God. So, like I said, as the praise team plays, I encourage you to, like I said, be the few. Be the few that are going to go out and work the harvest. Because there's somebody out there that might be needing you. If you got something in your life that you've been struggling with that you need to let go, let it go. I know it's not as easy as that sometimes, but it can start right here. Your consistency, your comfort zone, that moment where you say, hey, I'm going to stay prayed up, studied up, could start right here, right now. It could. But remember, work's hard. And God calls us to do difficult things because he knows we can. Through him, he knows we can do it. And that's all he's asking. He's not like my boss. He'll put me on a job and be like, this is all you. It's all on you. Get it done. God's like, it's going to be difficult, but come along with me. Let's pray. Father God, we just come to you today, Lord, and we just thank you so much. We thank you for the struggles, with the water and all the other stuff. We just thank you, Lord, that you have blessed us with this building. You've blessed us with everything in our lives, Father God, our families and all the good stuff. And I just pray right now, Father, that anybody in here right now that maybe is thinking about stepping out of that comfort zone or is afraid or is holding on to that thing, Lord, I pray right now that you would just release them from it, that you would have them come up here and pray and just be done with that for today. And like I said, so their consistency would start today, Lord, in your precious and holy name. Amen.